For those who spend decades behind the wheel, the deep isolation of the Nevada desert becomes a routine backdrop rather than a threat. Jake had been running the route from I-80 to US 50 for 11 years. He was a veteran of the silence, a man who had long since grown accustomed to the sensory deprivation of the long haul. This is Highway 50, stretching across nearly 300 miles of black desert with no cell service and no lights. It has earned a reputation as the loneliest road in the country. That loneliness has birthed a specific code among the truckers who navigate it. It's an unwritten rule passed down at truck stops and over CB radios. Never, under any circumstances, pick up a hitchhiker at mile marker 73 after the clock strikes midnight. At 2:13 a.m. last Tuesday, the temperature outside Jake's cab was 19 degrees. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the reach of his own high beams as he passed through the most remote stretch of the route. His lights caught a figure on the shoulder. It was a girl, standing directly on the frozen asphalt. She was barefoot, wearing a thin summer dress that was completely soaking wet despite the sub-zero air. Jake knew the rule, but the sight of a person freezing to death in the middle of nowhere triggered a survival response. His instinct to protect a vulnerable person overrode 11 years of roadside caution. He pulled over. The air that rushed into the cab when he opened the door carried a heavy, unnatural stench. It didn't smell like the desert. It smelled like wet copper and stagnant, rotting pond water. The girl climbed in with a stiff, mechanical motion, as if her joints were seized by the cold. She didn't look at Jake or acknowledge his warning that she was going to freeze. She simply sat down and stared straight through the windshield. Water poured off her, instantly saturating the leather seat. Her skin was a dull, gray blue, and her lips were cracked and frozen, yet she didn't shiver. Jake tried to break the silence, offering to take her as far as Ely. He received no answer. She remained perfectly still, a silent, dripping presence in the passenger seat. As the truck pulled back onto the highway, the interior of the cab felt increasingly smaller. Jake was now locked in a moving vehicle with a passenger whose very physical presence felt like a violation of the natural order. With the heater set to 90 degrees, Jake watched the girl closely. She didn't blink, she didn't move. Most terrifyingly, her chest remained perfectly still. She wasn't breathing. His CB radio was switched off, yet it suddenly burst into a wall of static. Through the white noise, a faint, distorted voice whispered his name. On the dashboard, the digital thermometer began to drop. It slid from 68 degrees to 34 in less than 10 seconds, as if the heat was being sucked out of the room by an external force. Jake's breath began to fog in the air, but the windows didn't just mist over. Thick frost began to spiderweb across the inside of the glass, sealing the cab in a layer of ice while the heater continued to roar. The cabin had become a space where the normal laws of thermodynamics no longer applied. Jake was still holding the wheel, but he had lost all agency over the environment inside his own truck. When Jake finally spoke to her, the girl slowly turned her head. Her eyes were clouded over, opaque and white, like the eyes of a dead fish. Her mouth opened wider than humanly possible, her jaw unhinging as black, swampy water poured out of her throat onto the floorboards. She spoke with a voice that seemed to come from the radio and from underwater at the same time. She told Jake he shouldn't have stopped, because he saw him now. She pointed toward the rearview mirror. In the darkness of the sleeper berth, directly behind Jake's head, a tall, faceless man in a soaked flannel shirt sat waiting, leaning forward into the light. Jake slammed the brakes and dove out of the moving truck, tumbling onto the asphalt. When he stood up and looked back, the cab was empty. There was no sign of the girl or the man, only a wet seat and a single, oily black handprint on the passenger window. Standing alone on the highway, Jake was safe from the moving truck, but the physical mark left on the glass suggested that the encounter hadn't ended simply because he had exited the vehicle. Jake made it to the Petro truck stop in Ely, where the fluorescent lights offered a jarring contrast to the darkness of the road. He found his colleague, Mike, and recounted the mate's events in a feverish blur. Mike didn't offer skepticism. Instead, he pulled up a news archive from 2019. It was a report on Sarah Wynn, a 22-year-old who had drowned at mile marker 73 when her car was swept into a wash. The girl in the article's photo was the girl in Jake's passenger seat. Sarah and her boyfriend had been trapped in the submerged car for 3 days before anyone found them. They had spent 72 hours in the same dark, stagnant water that Jake had smelled in his cab. Mike explained the nature of the rule. The girl is a diversion. Her presence in the passenger seat is the mechanism that allows the figure from the back to enter the vehicle. The local legend paints a predatory picture. Sarah Wynn serves as the bait, and the man in the sleeper berth is the one who never leaves. Jake tried to move on, but at 3:13 a.m. he woke up in a freezing sweat. His truck was off, but his dashcam was blinking. It had been triggered by motion while he was driving through the desert. He played the footage back. The passenger seat next to him appeared empty, but in the rearview mirror, Sarah Wynn was clearly visible. Directly behind his head, the faceless man leaned forward, inches from his ear. Jake completely quit trucking the next day. He sold the rig and left the industry entirely, hoping that by walking away from the road, he could walk away from the passenger. Weeks later, he was sitting in his personal car in a quiet neighborhood in Reno. He was far from Highway 50, surrounded by the lights and sounds of a city. At 2:13 a.m., his phone's Bluetooth connected to the car on its own. Through the speakers came the sound of wet, gurgling breath, followed by a voice thanking him for the ride. When he reached back, his hand hit a soaking wet upholstery. The events on the loneliest road in America demonstrate a chilling reality for those who stop at mile marker 73. You can change your car and your city, but some passengers are impossible to drop off.